Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Nick.
And in this mid-aughts nostalgia special, we will be travelling back through time and space with an old friend in the 3 BBC specials that make up the 14th Doctor's run, and then battling a series of evil exes in the new Netflix anime, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. But before all of that, Nick, do you have something from the mid-aughts to recommend to our listeners?
No, I've actually made the mistake of watching something relatively recent. It is based on a manga. This is the anime Pluto, which is currently on Netflix as of a few weeks ago. Apparently it did originally run from September 2003 to April 2003 in manga form. So this is actually another bit of aughts media, albeit this is a modern adaptation of some aughts media. So this is a sort of sci-fi crime story set in a world where robots live alongside people, in which the seven most powerful robots in the world are being killed off by a mysterious attacker who seems to model himself on the god of the underworld, Pluto. And Detective Kasich, who just happens to be one of the most powerful robots in the world, one of this group himself, must try and solve this case before the attacker comes after him. This is extremely good, actually. This is one of those things that seems quite simple and straightforward because, I've just managed to explain it in a single, not that convoluted sentence. But when you actually get into it and actually watch it, it's actually very complex and does a lot of world building. Like, there's a lot of detail built up about the Persian robot war, which preceded the current age, and what all of the individual most powerful robots did during that war. And there's a lot of thought and world building that's clearly got into this. The original manga, this is based on a story by Naoki Urasawa. I gather it's also a sort of adaptation of a story featuring the robot's superhero Astro Boy, which is I think a major ongoing manga series in Japan. This is not a cultural area I'm that expert on, as you may be able to tell. But this is a sort of adaptation of a storyline from Astro Boy, which does feature a character who does appear to be Astro Boy. Possibly taking it a bit further and going a bit more into the sort of world building of these robots and their roles and all their individual lives, which many of which are then tragically snuffed out, obviously, by this serial murderer.
Yeah, that does sound very good. Astro Boy is something I've heard of and read about through people who write about especially like Japanese culture and science fiction. I get the feeling it's one of those like big totemic stories that casts a long shadow, similar to things like Godzilla and stuff that, it's quite old. I think it's from like the 50s or 60s. But this sounds like quite an interesting modern adaptation. So is this a Japanese TV show, or is it like an American adaptation of a Japanese manga?
I think it may be a Japanese show possibly, but it's premiering on Netflix here. Maybe it was made in Japan, but Netflix paid for it. I don't know. It's a good show, though.
No, it does sound very good. It sounds like a really interesting world, and with lots of layers to unpick. I mean, we've talked a lot before in this podcast about how having like your detective as a main character works really well, because obviously they're just someone who goes out there, probes mysteries, talks to people, asks questions. Murder mystery setup is a good way to get into the story.
Well, especially here because the detective is, quite heavily involved in the mystery and has his own dark past involving this war. So it's all very intertwined. The main surprise about this, to be honest, was just how complex and multi-stranded it was. The amount of characters and subplots to keep track of, considering this is only 8 episodes, is quite impressive. I gather it's pretty much... Again, I have not read the original manga, but I gather it's quite a faithful adaptation. I think there are like 8 volumes comprising the original story, and there are like 8 hour-long episodes of this manga, which I gather adapts it fairly faithfully.
So this is the whole story in its entirety. It's not a sort of season 1.
Yes, it doesn't seem like there's going to be a sequel, no. This is a contained miniseries.
Okay, cool. So that's something that can be easily binged over Christmas, and you'd have the whole thing.
If you're a sci-fi crime person, then yes, this is extremely good, extremely accessible, extremely sort of straightforward. It's quite a basic sci-fi premise in some ways, There's a world where there are some robots is not the newest, most original idea, but it's a very interesting, fresh take, and I think a lot of the appeal is just a very sort of good, tense crime storytelling.
Again, I think what we said on this podcast quite a bit is that, there aren't really no original concepts, or it's all about how you execute them. The story you try to tell is what makes something really, really good. Some stuff that looks either very simple on paper or just frankly absurd on paper can lead to a great story if it's told well.
Well, and plus a lot of the fun here is the kind of slightly more mysterious or magical or, I don't know, almost hellish undertones of this, because obviously the killer models himself after Pluto, and there's something quite creepy and otherworldly and barely able to look upon it about this killer for quite a lot of the show, which is quite nicely built up and paid off.
Yeah, there's an interesting like allusion to Roman mythology there.
Well, yeah, because there's not much magic or mysticism in this show, but there's this weird mystique around the killer, which is quite nicely played.
Yeah, this does sound very good. Yeah, something that completely passed me by. Netflix hadn't thrown it up in its recommendations to me, so yeah, definitely something to consider checking out.
Yeah, I've had it recommended to me by a few comics people. A few people I follow quite like Naoki Urasawa's work, so yeah, they check this out, and yeah, apparently it's a good adaptation. So yeah, worth a go. Alistair, what have you consumed?
Well, there's another Roman connection here, which is that I've been watching a recent TV show that we've discussed on the podcast before, or I've discussed in the recommendations section, which I've been diving into the second season of Domina, which is on now. That's a sort of high profile, high budget at least, historical drama set in ancient Rome, sort of charting the rise of Augustus Caesar, all told from the point of view of his wife, Livia Drusilla, who, various schemes and murders her way to her husband's absolute power. So this is the second season, which is focusing very much on the drama of who will succeed, Augustus as the first citizen. And they're kind of building up the next generation of the kind of, the children of the Judeo-Claudian dynasty, and who's going to be the successor. What I like about this show is, and it relates to an essay I read by the writer Ada Palmer, which is when you're writing historical fiction, and she wrote about it from writing about Vikings for her next novel, you've got several things you've got to contend with. There's the people who know nothing about the period, the people who know only a tiny bit, and she said, for example, people who all their knowledge of Vikings comes from Marvel and Thor. And then there's the people who know quite a lot, but also, some of the stuff that's in the general circular and general public's sort of consciousness isn't accurate. And there's the people who, kind of up to date with recent academic research. And what I like about this show is, it kind of works on all those levels, in that if you know nothing about ancient Rome or the history beyond the very basics, then you can just enjoy it as like a drama series, about people lusting after power, the competition to be the chosen successor. But if you know the history, there's various little nods and things about what's coming next. Like in this season, there's the young Tiberius becoming increasingly violent and disturbed. So we all know where that will go, and various nods to people's plans for the future that you might know come to ruin. So if you're interested in ancient Rome and a sort of Game of Thrones-esque kind of blood and sex drama, then I can recommend this show.
So some good geeky lore shout-outs then, some nice little drop-ins for the hardcore fans.
Yeah, exactly. Again, not too dissimilar to Game of Thrones, that would obviously nod to things coming up in the books or whatever, if you knew that. I think this show, certainly like when the first season came out back in 2021, there was a bit of a, this is for Game of Thrones fans. I mean, it has Liam Cunningham in it, obviously, who was in Game of Thrones. And the sort of thing, do you like that? Well, this one's Game of Thrones, but it's ancient Rome. And with the same sort of approach to storytelling, in that something quite violent happens in every episode. They usually explain various bits of the lore or backstory through various sex scenes and stuff like that, just to keep you hooked. So I feel the kind of, as time's gone by, the whole kind of this show's the new Game of Thrones thing has sort of subsided, but it is still a good drama, and especially if you're interested in ancient Rome.
I mean, this didn't debut till 2021, apparently, he says, having obviously just Googled it. So I guess by then the Game of Thrones thing had somewhat subsided anyway.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously people are casting around for the next big thing in the sort of vacuum that Game of Thrones left. I guess it helped that not much came out in 2020 because of the pandemic, or a lot of things were paused. I mean, obviously, the new Game of Thrones is the new Game of Thrones, the House of the Dragon, which is back soon anyway. And I'm sure we'll be discussing at some point on this podcast. But it's a good bit of drama. There was a HBO show from a few years ago called Rome that had Kieran Hines, amongst others, in it. That was a pretty good historical drama about, the first season was about the rise of Julius Caesar. The second one was kind of about Augustus's early career as Octavian. And this, it sort of follows on from that. And it's in, again, the same sort of style of, there's a fair amount of blood and bonking. It's a subgenre of historical drama.
I was going to say, throwing in blood and sex to keep people interested in the dry history has been a classic approach since long before Game of Thrones.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the appeal of I, Claudius, going back to the 70s, which is a great show and very, very tense and stuff, covering a similar period as well. I mean, I guess there's always been this allure of ancient times that basically, things were in the pre-Christian world, things were a bit, I don't know, more morally looser in that there was more sex and violence. It's a bit of a stereotype, I think. To be fair, one of the plot lines in this show is Augustus passing stricter marriage laws in ancient Rome, which was a real thing, and clamping down on extramarital affairs and taking control over who gets to marry and thus have sex, which is one of the ways that Augustus maintained his power over the Roman elite by basically being able to decide or approve their marriages. And that's kind of the plot line in this, and obviously that meant they had some more conservative attitudes to sex. But also, it is in the pre-Christian world, their morals were different, shall we say.
In the good old days.
In the good old days. And it's a political show, and again, what I like about the politics of the ancient world is that their political problems are still similar to, today. There's crisis of legitimacy, there's questions of who makes a good leader. I mean, a lot of this show is built around who's going to be the successor. Again, not too different to Succession that we watched obviously earlier this year. But the difference between the way they handled their politics and the way we handle politics is quite different in that they thought nothing of murdering people to get to where they want.
Whereas nowadays we just do it on a sort of metaphorical level, the murder.
Yeah, exactly. You just crush someone's soul. Succession would have been a different show if Shiv had literally shivved Roman. But yeah, I guess it's more of the psychological way they torture each other rather than the physical way.
Okay, and first up today, we'll be talking about the Doctor Who 60th anniversary specials, in which the 14th Doctor, played by David Tennant, must look into the mystery of, why he's again played by David Tennant, whilst also dealing with the return of his old 10th Doctor era companion Donna Noble, played by Catherine Tate, into his life, and of course the tragic cliffhanger from her previous run, in which she will die if she remembers the Doctor exists. So we got a 3-episode run dealing with all that, plus of course the looming spectre of his regeneration into 15th Doctor Ncuti Gatwa at the end of the run. We have seen the entire thing, and to be honest guys, we're probably going to have to do at least some spoilers at some point, probably quite early on. We're just going to assume that since it's going to be a week and a half after it aired, the final special, by the time this comes out, if you're deeply concerned with Doctor Who spoilers, you've probably seen them. If not, you may want to skip this. Okay, with that said, Alistair, what did you think of these?
Well, certainly the momentum has come back behind the show. Obviously, we're on the record on this podcast of not being particularly big fans of the writing of the Chibnall era, or thought Jodie Whittaker was very good in the role. But even despite the writing, there was a sense that Doctor Who had sort of declined in cultural cachet. It wasn't just this big thing that everyone was talking about. And between the 60th anniversary special and the return of David Tennant, the return of Catherine Tate, the return of Russell T Davies, I feel like the momentum's back behind the show. It feels in some ways very much like that kind of second, third season era when everyone was talking about it, and it was like it become appointment TV, to use a slightly cringeworthy phrase, that the TV that you'd sit down to watch when it happens. And I like that, and I like a lot of the good stuff about Russell T Davies' writing. However, I guess what I felt about this is it also reminded me of the things that I didn't like about his writing. I feel that these 3 episodes have the Russell T Davies good points and it has his flaws, and each episode I felt was flawed in some way. But overall, it was very nice to have this sort of, the sparkle and the big attention focused on Doctor Who. Having all that back is something I really enjoyed.
So what you're saying is, if you like the writing of Russell T Davies, you might enjoy this TV show written by Russell T Davies.
Yeah, exactly. It's not exactly a sparkling hot take, is it? It's not incendiary opinions that are going to light up the internet, unfortunately. But that's not what you come to MFV for. It's for sober analysis.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, it does say moderate in the title, so in some ways we were warning you all along. Yeah, I too enjoyed this. I think Russell T Davies is honestly one of the best TV writers working today. I think he's very good at a certain level of popular drama with a good sort of combination of laughs, momentum, and little doses of actual emotion leading to a grand emotional climax. He's very concerned with the point he's trying to make and the character emotion he's trying to convey, to the extent that he's much more bothered about that over the sci-fi, which is I think what sometimes puts him slightly at odds with some Doctor Who fans who would rather a little more concern was given to whether the sci-fi in a given episode holds together as opposed to whether it's basically borderline magic that just goes along with the emotions he's building. But as someone who basically got into Doctor Who as a whole during the Davis era, I'm pretty much fine with that. Because, yeah, this episode does feature, this mini-series does feature a few big moments, mostly at the end of the first and third episodes, where the plot is basically resolved by emotionally satisfying but slightly nonsensical magic. I'm going to attempt not to spend the whole review talking about the ending of the third special, although I'm sure we could. The big bi-generation reveal, we'll get to it. But yeah, I thought the first special especially did actually do a nice job of giving us some classic Tennant action. It's almost odd how much he just strides out of the TARDIS at the beginning of the first 14th Doctor special, and it's like he's never been away. He's just, yep, I'm back, I'm on the job, strolling around, waiting for something to happen to me. Like, yeah, the bit where he reacts to being David Tennant again has apparently been dealt with in his big what at the end of the last episode, and now he's just back. And fair enough, yeah, it does give you what you want, which is that nostalgia, that feeling of watching, as we say, a late 2000s Doctor Who episode. And it gives you that, and then it gives you his reunion with Catherine Tate and a lot of the emotion around that. And yeah, Catherine Tate is, it's not at this point, again, a searing hot take to say Catherine Tate is actually quite a good actress, especially in the context of Doctor Who, which I think goes quite well with her style of this sort of combination of these softer emotional moments and, like, big acting. And it's impressive how much they managed to wring, like, real pathos and emotion out of some quite brief exchanges between the Doctor and Donna scattered across these specials.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3-hour-long episodes, so there's a sense that this is it's a truncated season in its own right. I mean, it's quite nice that they breeze quite quickly through the whole David Tennant's back. I felt that had this been like a 10-episode run, that probably would have been the plot of the first episode, him adjusting to being back, but they don't really have time for that in 3 episodes, and they kind of get straight into it. Here's the adventures you're here to see, which, yeah, again, with Russell T Davies, there's not much waiting around. It's very fast paced. It moves through things quickly. There's lots of twists. Those is all good stuff that I enjoy. I like that they managed to basically cram everything that you want from a Doctor Who season down into these 3 episodes. Yeah, there's various bits in the present. There's an episode that takes place in the future. There's a brief visit to the past. They weave in 2 famous people from history, Isaac Newton and John Logie Baird. So yeah, which is all basically kind of ticking off the things for, Doctor Who season. Tick, he goes to the past. Tick, he goes to the future. Tick, there's a companion. Tick, there's a classic villain brought back. Tick, he meets someone from history.
Yeah, there's the sort of soft horror thing as well. The sort of gently, actually unsettling bits in the second episode with their weird evil duplicates.
Yeah, going back to the old Doctor Who of the bit that some kids want to hide behind the sofa. Yeah, so it's ticking all those boxes and stuff. I guess I feel that the only thing with the Russell T Davies is that I feel that he just rushed through things quite quickly, that I appreciate him spending a bit more time on. I mean, it kind of got worse towards the end of his initial run with David Tennant, when he built up quite a large back cast of various different characters. And so, for example, at the end of the Catherine Tate season, when in a 2-part episode he tried to have a major Dalek story, wrap up the Catherine Tate character's plotline, bring back Rose, bring in Martha, bring in Mickey, bring in Rose's mum, bring in Captain Jack, bring in Sarah Jane. It all got a bit much. It should have been at least 3 episodes, not 2. And to be fair, this isn't quite as bad as that. Partly, I think that he did resist the urge to bring back loads and loads and loads of people and try to cram lots and lots of appearances and, competing storylines with classic characters into these 3 episodes, because that would have overloaded it. But I do feel like, yeah, sometimes he would just breeze through things quite quickly. Like, maybe I'd have preferred him spending a little bit longer resolving the plotline with Donna would die if she remembered the Doctor and how they resolve that. And yeah, again, I felt there's a lot of competing pressures in the final episode. But yeah, I guess maybe we'll get to the final episode.
I mean, I think ultimately, as you say, he's only got 3 episodes. I mean, maybe if he had a 10-episode run with the 14th Doctor, Donna wouldn't have remembered to episode 4 or something, and there would have been a few episodes where maybe the Doctor was secretly travelling around with her daughter or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously he didn't have time to do that, so you don't want to spend 3 episodes dicking around with Catherine Tate having amnesia. You've got to resolve that by the end of the first one, really.
Yeah, no, you are right there. You are right there. It's just, I guess, I don't know. It's my lingering criticism about Russell T Davies' Doctor Who is his just ability to cannon through stuff at high speed.
I think that's kind of part of his appeal, isn't it? The momentum, the constant feeling that everything's just on the hop. David Tennant running from this to this to this, going, oh.
Yeah, I mean, that is the appeal. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and it keeps it fun. It keeps it entertaining. Yeah, obviously it holds the attention of the younger viewers, which the show is primarily aimed at. All that's good stuff. I guess it's almost like a double-edged sword, it's kind of both good and flawed. It's a signature style. It's like a lot of writers, you've consumed a lot of their stuff, you kind of become aware of their style and their how they handle things, but also you become aware of the moments when it's they maybe need to get away from themselves to improve their writing. It's not easy, managing this high profile show with limited BBC resources, although you can see the Disney money just kind of pouring into this, which is nice. But yeah, I guess it's one of the things that I just feel that sometimes I feel it would just some of the more powerful emotional bits. And, as you say, Russell T Davis's writing is so much based around these big emotional moments. I don't mind it. The science doesn't make sense if it emotionally lands. I always feel it might land a bit better with just a little bit more breathing room.
I do think that some of it could be given a bit more space if he had the space, but obviously ultimately he doesn't. I think the mystery of why the 14th Doctor looks like the 10th Doctor, I think is eventually resolved by one line from Donna that you have to be paying attention to catch in the final episode.
Yeah, again, that did go by very quickly.
Yeah, and ultimately the answer is, predictably, there's no sci-fi answer. It's the emotional answer. It's, as far as I can tell, it's the 14th Doctor came back because he was yearning to spend some family time with Donna or something.
Yeah, it's like when they explained why Peter Capaldi was the Doctor, despite the fact he'd also played a character in ancient Rome, funny enough, before. But yeah, they kind of, nodded away with one line of dialogue. It's, again, that's fine. That works for Doctor Who. I'm not criticising that. It's just when the big feels land, you kind of want them to, I don't know, feel them a bit more. Yeah, but overall, it was just great to see, Catherine Tate, being back, doing her part. It was good to see David Tennant back. I felt that they broadened the cast out a bit more. I like the introduction of Catherine Tate's daughter, Rose. That's a good character. I don't know if she'll be back in any future episodes, but yeah, possibly someone they might revisit.
Yeah, I like the way they went straight back into it. I think the sort of 14th Doctor, Donna chemistry, the sort of matey, almost equals thing, is something that works very well and is genuinely quite different from all the other companions, and it's nice to see it again. And yeah, the energy is there. I liked the second episode a lot, just for the sort of the change in pace, if anything. Because, even though we've just talked a lot about how Davis does a lot of running around shouting, the second episode is actually a lot softer and quieter. And honestly, at times, sometimes watching it, you feel like it could, come on, move a bit faster. But it does do a very good job of, stopping and sitting with the emotions and building things a bit.
Yeah, the second episode was probably my favourite of the three, although they were all good. And yeah, it reminded me a lot of Midnight from the original Tennant and Tate run back in season 4 or something, which was, again, one when Davis slowed it down, gave the drama some space, and it kind of was more powerful. The advantage of both Midnight and this episode is it wasn't teeing off a season or wrapping it up, so it could have some space. It was the classic episode from this season that felt like a regular Doctor Who adventure. It wasn't, trying to resolve things from the wider storyline or the lore or push things forward to the next bit. And it is also very scary when the Doctor meets an alien or a monster, and the thing is the Doctor doesn't know what this creature is or where they come from or what they are. The fact there are limits to his knowledge, and there are even things stranger out there than the Doctor, and that's always a bit kind of like, ooh, this, the safety wheels have come off this story, so that was good.
Yeah, there were some nicely played scenes where they did manage to play several times the trick of us not knowing which was the real Doctor or Donna. As well as, I quite liked the way that they were kind of horrific and unsettling. The fake Doctor and fake Donna were also sort of a bit rubbery and a bit silly. I don't think they're going to, give children complete nightmares. They're just sort of a bit weird. If anything, they're probably kind of scarier for adults. Yeah. It's a weird balance that they pulled off.
Yeah. No, it's this sort of thing, again, appropriate for the younger audience. And I believe also talking to a friend of mine's daughter who's, of sort of teenager, school age, again, probably the sort of age group that the show is pitched at, she was saying that the whole, long arm thing, which is, if you've seen the episode, you'll know what that's a reference to, apparently is something that has translated into school children's vocabulary. It's breezed through the younger audience as a meme in the sort of most powerful form since the "Are you my mummy?" which obviously, again, went sort of viral in the sense of being passed from person to person as a thing people say. So, it's back to striking chords with younger audience, which is, again, one of the good things about Russell T Davies is that, he can connect with people, he can push these ideas from Doctor Who out into the wider world, and which is what gives the show its cultural cachet, being again, appointment TV.
Well, yeah, but that's one of the things he's good at. One of the things that Moffat and Chibnall sometimes miss the mark on. He's quite good at making this stuff seem both big and ridiculous and cosmic, but also quite down-to-earth and relatable and human. He's quite good at finding the silly little human moments or emotions in this big stuff. There's a lot of good stuff in the first episode, which is just the Noble family hanging around talking about, how their day-to-day lives are affected by the arrival of Beep the Meep or whatever, and it's all good stuff. It's one of the things he's good at.
Yeah, no, exactly. He's a good writer of, character drama and stuff. Which is why, when his big climaxes turn on emotion, it does really work, because he's good at writing genuine emotion. You generally feel about these people, feel for their lives. They seem like, real, believable people. Again, and just those scenes of, the Doctor and Donna talking to the copies of them, or do you know if they're talking to copies or not in the second episode? Yeah, it's kind of like something from a play. It's just people in rooms chatting, and that's where the tension comes from. But because of the emotion behind it, it's as searing as some of the big epic fight sequences or bits when things are exploding and people are running, because Russell T Davies can write those dialogue and emotional scenes really well. And also it gave Tennant and Tate space to act, and both of them are very good. I've seen them both on the stage, and again, they're accomplished actors, and giving them some scenes without all just basically down to their acting talent really, really worked.
Yeah, and in those same scenes, they managed to wring some emotion out of the flux from the Chris Chibnall era, which is impressive. I mean, to be fair, he's basically just treating it like the Time War. It's a thing that's happened recently that's traumatised the Doctor, and it can work in that context. It's fine.
Yeah, again, that's something Russell T Davies does very well. Interesting that he's picking up some of the stranger threads from the Chibnall era, but we'll see where he goes with them. I can imagine, he'll do what Russell T Davies does well, which is, use them as emotional catharsis.
I mean, it's interesting to see whether this idea of the Doctor, the 14th Doctor, taking some time off to recover from the trauma, is he going to fully recover from the flux? Is that the last we'll hear about it? I guess we'll see. It vaguely feels like he might try and make the start of the 15th Doctor era a bit more of a fresh start, but we'll have to see what actually happens in it.
Yeah, I guess they want to recruit new fans. That's the thing. It's like the show needs to kind of, at some level, be like a fresh start, to bring in new audiences, to maintain its popularity. And there's Disney money coming in. It's going to be on Disney Plus. There's definitely lots of money. Like, not only do they have Neil Patrick Harris, who's like probably one of the highest profile guest stars they've had in a while, certainly the highest profile person who's not playing the Doctor themselves. That seems to be good money, but also just the fact like there's lots of more exterior shooting, lots of extras and stuff, like scenes that felt bigger. That's the sort of thing that I feel that BBC doesn't really have the budget for anymore, but now with Disney money they can. I don't know if the BBC pulled the stops out a bit more because it's the 60th and they wanted it to look good, or maybe that's why they signed a deal with Disney, because they needed the money to make the 60th look good.
I think at this point they may need the money just to make the show, to be honest.
Yeah, it is expensive. And as we pointed out, there was definitely a dialing back of budgets under the Chibnall era, which didn't help. Although, as I just previously said, a great writer can just have the Doctor and Donna in a room and have it as electric.
Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of scenes where they've clearly shut off the middle of Camden, which shows that there's some money flying around. Yeah,
I appreciate seeing Cyberdog in the background of so many shots. I know, again, a sort of aughts cultural icon of goth and techno culture. But it's there in the background. The Cyberdog Instagram feed made quite a bit out of the fact that they were in the background of Doctor Who.
Yeah, I mean, they could have crammed in a few more, hardcore anniversary references, I guess. I mean, I saw some people complaining online, but these didn't feel like 60th anniversary of Doctor Who episodes so much as it's almost the 20th anniversary of the Tennant era episodes. Which is a fair point, I guess, but to be honest, as you said, they're crammed enough already. Yeah, that's one of the things. It's probably good they didn't have loads of Doctors coming back and things like that. But yeah, I guess the one thing that's kind of noticeable by its absence is they didn't do a lot of people coming back to celebrate the 60th. There wasn't Matt Smith, there wasn't Peter Capaldi, there wasn't any classic Doctors turning up. Yeah, even though several turned up for the 100th anniversary of the BBC special. Oh yeah, I was going to say, if you want to see, look at some classic Doctors, you need only look back literally one episode, to be fair. Yeah, so maybe they feel they've done all that. Yeah, maybe the fact that, again, weaving in a plot line, bringing in Matt Smith or something like that would have just, again, definitely overloaded the story they had. Yeah, they had Tennant back, they had to progress the relationship with Donna. They had to tell some self-contained stories. I think that's about enough to be getting on with. Yeah. And of course, they also had to introduce the new Doctor in the final episode, which we could probably finally talk about now. Yep, that was a surprising twist. I did like the fact that they didn't do what they almost always do, which is wait till the last minute and have the Doctor regenerated and the new Doctor appear and go like, whoa, new face. Ah. They actually I'm sure Shooty Gatwa could still have sold that dialogue. Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, will anything ever be Peter Capaldi's new kidneys? Yeah, it was nice that Shooty Gatwa actually had several scenes, as a means of introducing him to the new
audiences new and old. It's nice that he had several scenes rather than just appearing right at the end.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed that. I did wonder if they would take advantage of the fact that they clearly had who the new Doctor would be planned out ages in advance, so it would be, the same show with the same showrunner to, weave Shooty Gatwa into the story a bit more. And they sort of, they've not gone full pelt and made the entire 3-episode run some kind of weird time travel thing. The new Doctor, hanging around throughout. But, they've used it to bring him in a bit earlier and do something a bit weirder and different. And, we've had, 5 major regenerations now, which have basically been some variation on Doctor gives monologue in TARDIS and then explodes. Or in Jodie Whittaker's case, just for a change, she stood slightly outside it. So I think there's time for Russell T Davies to come back and go, right, we're going to do something radically, weirdly different now.
No, you're right. Yeah, it was good though. This was different because we'd seen, like I say, we'd seen that quite a bit, including last time David Tennant left.
Yeah, and My Generation is, again, deeply silly. I can see why some might find it a bit undercutting to have the moment which is normally a sort of Shakespearean pseudo-death, or at least has become that under the last few Doctors. Instead, this sort of weird borderline slapstick scene where the Doctor becomes two people being pulled out of each other. It's very funny. It's a very good sort of reversal. And ultimately, you're either going to think, what? Or laugh at it.
I feel at this point you have to be bought into the way Russell T Davies does things, or you're not. And I don't mind that it's off the wall. It's crazy. There seems to be no consistency to the regeneration across all of Doctor Who. There's, the Fourth Doctor and the Fifth Doctor has this whole thing of this weird shadowy figure following the Doctor around, watching him, and at the end they merge together and become a new Doctor. Different things seem to happen in different strange ways. It's Doctor Who. You write it to what works in the episode, and if you sell the emotion, then you're all good. And I feel he did, so yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, and the scene with the two Doctors interacting and the admission from David Tennant that he's pretty hammered and needs a rest was, it was quite nice. It was quite sweet. It was quite pleasant. It was a good emotional payoff to these specials where the Doctor did seem quite ragged.
Yeah, and also they decided not to end on, tragedy. These people have been separated by some factor of time or memory or the universe falling apart or wherever it is. Yeah, there's a lot of tragic ends to Doctor-companion relationships. And this one wasn't. In fact, even there was a bit in the final episode when it goes through how many of the Moffat-era companions died, or at least died metaphorically. And it's quite nice that that didn't happen this time.
Yeah, I do take the point that some have made that having David Tennant still hanging around somewhere, the 14th Doctor, does this undercut the 15th Doctor being the Doctor rather than merely a Doctor? I don't really have an answer for that. The answer is it depends how he does it, I guess. If we see David Tennant every other episode, then maybe a bit. If we now don't see David Tennant again for a year or two, then it'll probably be fine.
Yeah, that's very much it. Yeah, depends how it's handled. But yeah, Russell T Davies is a good writer, so if he's got any sense, he'll be like, right, let's focus on this new Doctor, get new companion in, get some momentum behind this new incarnation of the show. But that's what people want to be talking about. It's similar to what we said. The great strength of Marvel is they understand keep moving forwards, new characters, new storylines, bring in new stuff. Don't rest on your laurels. Forward momentum is what keeps people entertained and sustained. Doctor Who is, that's always been its great strength. It's always had forward momentum in that you can replace the main character pretty much, new actor, new vibe, new approach to the main character, new companion, keep moving forward, keep the momentum. And I'm sure Russell T Davies understands that, and exactly, he realises the momentum is with the forward progression of the show into this new actor and the new companion that we'll meet in the next episode.
Yeah, I'm interested. I'm up for it. I must admit, I enjoyed this exercise in nostalgia. To be honest, if there's someone who is my Doctor, it's probably David Tennant, just because he was the one who got me into the show properly, rather than being more of a sort of casual viewer. And I cannot deny this was nostalgia aimed at me, and it did more or less work. But I am interested to see how Davis, moves the show forward and does something modern and different and turns it into something thoroughly 2023. I'm interested to see if and how he does that.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the hallmarks of his writing were here, and the things I liked about it were back. I liked how he kept up his whole thing of he only brings back classic villains to make some kind of point. Which he always did. And then this one, it's the Toy Maker comes back, and it's something about our addiction to social media rage. So again, he's keeping that up.
It's a good point, the gamifying of anger. It's a fair point for the Toy Maker.
Yeah. And again, it's pitched right appropriately at the audience for the show, which is, say, younger people, sort of teenagers and downwards, But it's still, older people like the show, classic fans like me, someone who's seen a lot of old school Doctor Who on VHS. I enjoyed this. I just really enjoyed that the momentum's back behind the show, that Doctor Who's back to being appointment TV, which is, again, I like the fact when it was kind of at the centre of at least the geek culture conversation. And if Russell T Davies has restored that, then that's great.
Yeah, I mean, the closest I have to a complaint about the final episode is that I felt like once he triggered the regeneration, the show lost interest in the Toymaker a bit. And I felt like him being beaten in a game of catch, which it was just a few scenes of them throwing and catching, and then he lost, was a bit of an underwhelming exit for Neil Patrick Harris. I mean, maybe he'll be back, who knows, in which case, fair enough. But yeah, as it was, I felt like it was very much, right, his role is over, piss off into your box while we spend some time with David Tennant and Ncuti Gatwa.
I mean, once again, I feel again it's just the rushed nature of some of Russ T Davies' writing that this final episode needed to wrap up the Doctor Donna relationship, introduce the new Doctor, and do a thing with the Toymaker, and a little bit with Bernard Cribbins, which was nice to see him. I'm glad that he actually shot some stuff before he died. That was actually quite emotional. Yeah,
but they did spend like a solid 2 or 3 minutes at least on that catch scene, and it's like I think that's probably about the right amount of time to spend on the Toymaker because they had admin to do. But I don't know, I was disappointed they didn't think of something slightly more, clever and intellectually satisfying or interesting or metaphorically memorable to beat the Toymaker rather than just a game of catch. But that's just me.
That's no, I agree with you there. Yeah, that was a misfire. The show basically switched its focus as soon as Ncuti Gatwa came on. Yeah, the first half of the episode, or first 2/3, is the Doctor relating to the Toymaker. The next bit just switches to the two Doctors relating to each other. There's not really space for a third person in this relationship.
Well, there was for a few minutes. They just needed to have the two Doctors beat the Toymaker in a way that I found more interesting. That's all I want. I don't mind Ncuti Gatwa being there and participating. In fact, he very much should. That just wasn't quite the one. But hey-ho.
But yeah, and now onwards and upwards, hopefully.
Yeah, no, aside from that one slight wobble for me, yeah, these were great. These were a lot of fun. These just rolled through with all the rollicking, swashbuckling energy I expect from Davis Doctor Who. Strong time. Good fun. Okay, and last off today, the final of our nostalgia tour, it is Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. This is a new anime adaptation / semi-sequel to the Scott Pilgrim film and graphic novel series from the era. And in this version of the story, and we are going to have to spoil the big twist, the big variation, the way this story diverges from previous Scott Pilgrims probably in the next couple of minutes. Before the end of this introduction, I'm going to spoil it. If you do want to watch this, and you are a Scott Pilgrim fan from back in the day, and you really want to have a good, pure experience, for the record, I would recommend watching this without having the twist variation thing spoiled for you by me. I really, really would. I'm going to do it anyway, but I would recommend, if you're planning on having the experience of watching this, and especially if you're a major Scott Pilgrim appreciator, not listening to this review first. All that having been said, here I go. So, the big twist here is the first episode of this, I think it's 9-episode series, plays out exactly as it did in the film, with Scott Pilgrim fighting the first of Ramona's evil exes. This is Matthew Patel. But crucially, instead of defeating him and then beginning a run of defeating the others as well, Scott Pilgrim gets killed, or bashed, and seems to turn into a coin by Matthew Patel in a few seconds and vanishes from the story. And the rest of the series becomes the story of what exactly happens in the aftermath of Scott's disappearance and Ramona stepping up and becoming more or less the protagonist of this series and addressing her relationship with her evil exes and with Scott himself a bit more directly. So yes, this is the 9-episode anime series covering this weird Scott Pilgrim variant. This brings back, I think, pretty much all of the cast from the original movie by Edgar Wright, including Michael Cera, Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Ramona, and many, many more. We have seen this whole series. Again, we're going to spoil it even more probably as we go forward. Alistair, what did you think of this?
So I really liked this show, and what I liked about it is, exactly what you've said, is that it went off in a different, surprising direction. The show it kind of reminded me the most of was that Watchmen TV show from a few years ago, in that both what they did is kind of took the original material that they were adapting, and rather than doing a straight adaptation a la the Edgar Wright Scott Pilgrim versus the World film, took that as a sort of springboard to jump off and tell a different, slightly stranger story. That surprised me and was very, very interesting, and I felt that this story, it kind of gave the characters more space to develop. We found out more about them and who they were as people, especially Ramona had a much more developed character, but all the others as well. So, and it kept me guessing what was going to happen next, because it wasn't following the same path that I'd seen in the past. So full marks for creativity.
Yeah, no, I'm honestly impressed Netflix made this at all, as it seems really heavily aimed at people who have consumed either the film or the comics. Like, I don't know what a newcomer would make of this. Part of me wants to find one, make them watch it, and then ask them, because I really am not sure what's in it for them. But as someone who has consumed both the film and the graphic novels in the past, I had a great time. It actually manages to make a whole project out of, like, basically reassessing Scott Pilgrim from a 2023 perspective, whilst actually making that funny and dramatic enough to not be as much of a slog as that probably sounds. Like, there's a lot of thoughts here about how Scott Pilgrim actually looks, and, whether Ramona dealing with her exes by having her new boyfriend bash them up is really the most healthy thing to do, and, a lot of talk about making peace with your past. Maybe in a similar way to David Tennant's Doctor who knows, maybe there's a connection there. While still being very, very funny, there's a whole set piece strung across 2 or 3 episodes involving a movie being made of Scott Pilgrim's life for some reason, just in the town where he lives. Allegedly written by someone he knows, and directed by Edgar Wrong, according to the credits, and with security guards played by Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, which is just an extremely good level of referencing, and it's extremely funny.
Yeah, I guess the film they're making is the original film of Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and now the sort of characters are kind of appearing in it and like playing different parts at various different points. Like, I mean, we're at a sort of Charlie Kaufman level of like meta referencing and kind of circular plotting at this point. But yeah, I don't know. It kind of works if you know all the nods and the things that are going on. Yeah, I guess that's part of the fun of this show. Yeah, like you say, it's probably one for the fans, but I don't know. I do like kind of Edgar Wright's kind of weird off the wall sense of humor. And he is also back, obviously, in charge of the show. So, yeah, you're kind of very much getting the kind of, I don't know, the modern update of the Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Well, it's written by Brian Lee O'Malley, who made the original graphic novel, so it is also him very much reassessing his work.
So, yeah, they're taking it and they're updating it rather than just, like, doing the thing again.
Yeah, I mean, similar to that Slayers audio drama I talked about in the recommended section a few episodes ago. I think there's an element of sort of #justice for Ramona here, as she gets a bit more characterization, a bit more depth maybe than she did in the original, when she veered a little bit close to the old manic pixie dream girl archetype.
Yeah. I felt in the film she had like maybe a bit more. In the film, I say the Edgar Wright film from a while ago, that she had a bit more than being a sort of like some of the worst offenders in the manic pixie dream girl category, or sort of like empty, perfect women characters just there to stir men to life, But she definitely gets a lot more characterization here and feels like a more rounded, 3-dimensional person. So yeah, I mean, so do like much of the other characters. Like Knives Chew didn't have a huge amount of personality in the film, being other than just like a teenager who's besotted with Scott Pilgrim. His bandmate. The Alison Pill character is she's just angry and yells at people. There's things like that. Some of the evil exes are just angry evil people. Whereas, everyone gets some more scope to feel like a real person here.
I mean, a lot of those characters do get a bit more in the books, where, the story is spread across, like, 6 books rather than 1 film. So, some of that is expansions of things that were in the books, but it's still done very differently here, because, yes, the departure of Scott Pilgrim from the plot has sent things off in a different direction.
Yeah. And especially, give you a chance to focus more on Ramona Flowers as a character. I think the film has taken on cult status, partly because of the cast. Like, so many people who were in it went on to become very famous and very successful. They've got, I think, almost everyone back here. I mean, it's amazing that this TV show has in it Brie Larson, Chris Evans, Kieran Culkin, Audrey Plaza, Jason Schwartzman, Ellie Wong, Alison Pill, Anna Kendrick, Mary Elizabeth Weinstein, Michael Cera. If you're thinking that's a weird order to list the cast members of this show, that's in the order that I am most surprised they got back to, most surprised they got back. But yeah, they're all back.
Yeah, but as you say, this was a bit of a cult film. It was very much seemed to be a bit of a passion project in a lot of ways. It seems like everyone had fun making it, I guess. Yeah, I think there's some engagement with the slight anti-hero problem in Scott Pilgrim. He's not like a Punisher-level mass murderer, obviously. You don't have to, wonder why it's okay for him to kill all those people. But he was a bit of a loser, I think. And it sometimes felt like people took him more as a straight-up admirable hero than Brian Lee O'Malley originally intended.
Yeah, especially, again, the film that kind of simplifies things a lot. Where there's probably in the books probably more scope for kind of like nuance on that. Yeah, he's just sort of a plucky underdog. Every man in the films fighting these evil exes. He wants to get the girl. It's an easy character to root for. There's not a lot of room for nuance there.
Yeah, I think in the comics especially, he was meant to be a bit of a loser. Him being in his early 20s dating a 17-year-old was meant to be tangibly a bit much.
Red flag.
Yeah, red flag, as they
people
say.
say now. But and also I guess because obviously he defeats or kills them in the film, but like it's sort of weird. You bash someone, they turn into coins. It's this kind of blurring of video game reality with corporeal reality, or our world, whatever you want to call it. But what I liked about the TV show is they kind of amped that level up a bit more. Like partly because it's animated, so you can be a bit weirder, but like they made it more strange and more bizarre. Like it was a world where people are like, oh yeah, vegan portals. That's just, like no one like bats an eyelid about vegan people can create portals and things like that. Yeah, and vegan robots even more so because robots have never eaten meat.
So that's all of them then. It's just ludicrous shit.
Exactly, yeah. It's like Doctor Who level of like really don't think about the science, just go with it. But yeah, I like the fact they made it weirder and odder, and like there's a great scene when one of Ramona's evil exes fights her in a video shop, and there's a sort of scene of them kind of smashing through scenes from different films and stuff. And yeah, they're kind of like fighting across these like fictional worlds, and there's this strong element of like, is this real? Is this metaphorical? I mean, you can just kind of go with the weirdness in in an animated show, whereas in like a live action show, there's kind of, I don't know, it has to feel more real to be believable. Whereas here, they can kind of let the fantasy fly, which is one of the things I really liked.
Well, yeah, like in the comic, there's the sort of the weird twist where at first it seems kind of like a slice of life story, and then it's sort of revealed at the end of the first book, but it's actually like this weird video games rules world where people just fight each other and get punched and turn into coins. But yeah, here it's pretty much straight up, no, this is a really weird place the entire time.
Yeah, which I liked about it, yeah. And it's got that sense of like no one really bats an eyelid, yeah, whatever. And it keeps some of the things I liked from the film, I guess, which I'm sure are things that are kind of the case in the original comic, in that it's quite good at showing character conflict, which is kind of the essence of the story, in that this is a world where emotional conflict is resolved by physical fights. Each episode has at least one fight, and it comes up in sort of like Street Fighter style with someone versus someone. Scott Pilgrim versus Matthew Patel, or Lucas Lee versus the press or the paparazzi. And it's good at showing, using physical confrontation to show interpersonal conflict and even like personal conflict, people fighting themselves or competing with other people, and it kind of takes those conflicts and makes them physical and makes them very like overt. And that's a good way of showing character conflict and stuff. And also it kind of works with the whole video game aesthetic, slightly fantasy aesthetic, and the fact they just kind of full on go from like, in this world, you don't argue with someone, you fight them with magical powers. That's how you resolve things, and it's again totally believable. And I like that. It makes for entertaining TV.
Yeah, and I think it's also indicative of just how well built the whole world of Scott Pilgrim was. That there's loads of characters who actually can stand to be further explored in this show without it feeling a bit thin or a bit like there's not much else to talk about really. If anything, it's impressive almost how interesting and fun it is to spend time in the world of Scott Pilgrim even without Scott Pilgrim, because there's all these characters who can hold a scene perfectly well, or several scenes, or as you say, a whole emotional arc. So yeah, no, this was great. I mean, as I say, I don't know what you get out of it if you haven't seen Scott Pilgrim. If you haven't and you do watch it, please tell me what you got out of it. But yeah, if you have seen Scott Pilgrim or read Scott Pilgrim, then yes, definitely watch this. It's really good.
Yeah, it's really good. And to be fair, I feel if you watch the Edgar Wright Scott Pilgrim vs. the World when it originally came out and haven't seen it since, you can dive into this show. I mean, you just need to know kind of like the basic structure, which you'll remember from that film. Scott Pilgrim, lovable loser in a band, meets Ramona Flowers. She's awesome, but she has 7 evil exes. He must fight.
Yeah. No, this is great. This is spoilers, but if this isn't on the old top 5 list next week, I'll be amazed.
And that seems like a good point to point towards. What's next?
Yes, good point. What is next episode?
What is the next episode? Could it be the end of the year summary? Da, da, da. That's all we have time for this episode. If you have enjoyed this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, then please tell your friends or leave us a review online to help other people find out about the show. You can also visit our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can find other episodes of the podcast, bonus audio clips, and short written pieces by Nick and myself. Coming soon will be our summaries of film and TV in 2023.
And if you've particularly enjoyed anything we've done this year, anything at all, please follow us on social media, where we are MFV Podcast on Twitter or Modern Fantasy Violence on Facebook. And you can follow me on, mostly at the moment, Blue Sky and Instagram. If you search for nickbryan.com, then there's a little cartoon of me with a red background that pops up. I do still sometimes post on Twitter/X, but I always feel bad about it. I also have a website at nickbryan.com if you want lots of information in one place.
You can find more from me by searching for Alistair Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Threads and Blue Sky. Who knows, maybe in 2024 I'll post more there. You can also get more regular updates from me and more writing on my blog, which is redtrainblog.com, or on the website Everything Theatre. Or you can join us on the next issue of the podcast, where we will be doing our annual end-of-year review episode. This is where we'll count down our favourite film and TV shows of 2023, and we'll be deciding who's the top, who's the worst, and what we're looking forward to next year. Tune in next episode to find out. Until then, Merry Christmas. Goodbye.
Merry Christmas. Yeah, even by our standards, an incredibly unfestive Christmas episode.
Yeah.
Really didn't find anything festive to talk about this year. Never mind.
No. I was considering talking about Miracle on 34th Street, which I watched yesterday, but I didn't really have much to say other than it's a good film and it's very Christmassy. So I was concerned that wouldn't last very long in the recommendation section. It's a good Christmas film. It's on Disney+. Go watch it.
God bless us, everyone.
It's got a cameo from Alison Janney before she was in The West Wing. I say cameo, bit part.
Okay.
We'll see if this makes the final edit.